The scream died in Florence Ashford's throat when she heard the splintering of wood downstairs, replaced by the cold certainty that Thomas had finally found her again. She had made it 3 months this time, longer than the 2 weeks in Kansas, or the month in Missouri, working quietly in the small boarding house in Fort Lyon, Colorado, keeping her head down and her past buried. The August heat of 1878 pressed against the window as she grabbed the small cloth bag she kept packed beneath her bed, her hands trembling but practiced. She had learned to sleep in her clothes, to keep her boots within reach, to never truly settle anywhere. The bruises on her ribs had finally faded to yellow, but the memory of Thomas's rage when she had dared to leave him still woke her most nights. The voices downstairs grew louder. Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, was protesting something, her tone sharp with indignation. Then came the voice that made Florence's blood turn to ice, that smooth drawl Thomas used when he wanted something, when he was being charming before the violence erupted. "I am looking for my wife," Thomas was saying, and Florence could picture him removing his expensive hat, flashing that smile that had once made her foolish heart flutter 4 years ago. "She is confused, unwell. I only want to bring her home where she belongs." Florence pressed herself against the wall beside the window, her mind racing. The drop to the ground was too far. The back stairs would take her right past the parlor where Thomas stood. She was trapped, and he knew it. He always knew how to corner her, how to cut off her escape routes. That was how it had been for 2 years of marriage before she had finally run, stealing away in the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's wedding ring, a knock on her door, soft and urgent. "Miss Ashford." It was Mrs. Henderson's voice, barely above a whisper. "The back way, quickly now." Florence eased the door open to find the older woman's face pale but determined. She pressed a handful of bills into Florence's palm. "There is a man, lives about 5 miles west toward the mountains. Ethan Langley, ranch hand, keeps to himself mostly. Tell him Martha Henderson sent you. Tell him you need help." "I cannot put anyone else in danger," Florence whispered, but Mrs. Henderson was already pushing her toward the back stairs. "That husband of yours is asking every person in town. You will not make it to the next town on foot. Now go, child, before he thinks to check the back." Florence went, her feet light on the wooden steps, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could still hear Thomas's voice, that reasonable tone he used when he was lying, when he was pretending to be something other than the monster who had broken her arm for burning his supper, who had locked her in the cellar for speaking to the postman. The back door led to an alley, and Florence ran, keeping to the shadows, her bag clutched against her chest. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she reached the edge of town, and she did not dare look back. The mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing, and she fixed her eyes on them as she followed the dusty road west. Her lungs were burning by the time she spotted the ranch, a modest spread with a small house and a barn, corrals holding a dozen horses. A man was working with one of them, a beautiful paint mare that danced at the end of a long rope. He moved with easy confidence, his voice low and soothing as he worked the horse in circles, and he did not notice Florence until she was nearly at the fence. When he turned, she saw a face weathered by sun and wind, dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes the color of creek water in spring. He was tall and lean, probably in his late 20s, and he studied her with the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "Help you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Martha Henderson sent me," Florence managed, her voice hoarse from running. "She said you might help. I need somewhere to hide." Those green eyes sharpened, taking in her disheveled appearance the fear she could not quite mask. "Hide from what?" From whom? She corrected, glancing back toward town. My ex-husband, he found me again. Ethan Langley was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on her face. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Barn, back left corner. There is a tack room with a cot. Stay quiet and stay hidden. I will handle anyone who comes looking. You do not even know me, Florence said, bewildered by his immediate acceptance. I know Martha Henderson does not send people my way unless they truly need help, Ethan replied. He returned his attention to the mare, but his voice softened slightly. And I know that look in your eyes. Seen it before. Whatever you are running from, you have good reason. Florence did not wait for him to change his mind. She slipped into the barn, finding the tack room exactly where he had said. It smelled of leather and hay, and the cot was narrow but clean. She sank onto it, her legs finally giving out, and pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle the sob that wanted to escape. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, the light slanting through the small window had turned golden with evening, and voices were carrying from outside. Florence pressed herself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. I am looking for my wife. Thomas's voice, that dangerous calm still in place. Florence Ashford. Someone in town said they saw a woman matching her description heading this way. Cannot help you. Ethan's voice flat and uninterested. Been working horses all day, have not seen any woman. You would not be lying to me, would you, friend? The threat underneath the pleasant words was unmistakable. I am not your friend, Ethan said, and there was steel in his voice now. And I am telling you there is no one here but me and my horses. Now I have work to do, so unless you want to buy one of these animals, I suggest you move along. The silence stretched so long Florence thought she might faint from holding her breath. Then Thomas spoke again, and the charm was completely gone, replaced by something cold and vicious. If I find out you are lying to me, Cowboy, you will regret it. That woman is mine, and I will have her back. Mister, I do not know who you are or what your business is, but I am giving you 10 seconds to get off my property before I make you leave. Ethan's voice had not risen, but there was a quality to it now that made Florence shiver. 1. She heard the creak of leather, the jingle of a bridle. Thomas was mounting his horse. This is not over, he called. I will find her, and when I do, she will pay for every day she has made me chase her. The sound of hoofbeats faded, and still Florence did not move. It was full dark before the tack room door opened, and Ethan stood silhouetted against the barn's interior, a lantern in his hand. He is gone, Ethan said quietly. For now, but he will be back. Men like that always come back. Florence stood on shaking legs. I should leave. I have already brought trouble to your door. Where will you go? Ethan asked, setting the lantern on a barrel. He is watching the town, watching the roads. You would not make it a mile before he found you. Then what do you suggest? Florence heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. Ethan was quiet, his expression thoughtful in the flickering light. You stay here. Help me with the ranch work, earn your keep. When it is safe, when he moves on thinking you went somewhere else, then we will get you to the next town, somewhere farther away. Why would you do this? Florence asked, searching his face. You do not know me. This could bring violence to your home. Because it is the right thing to do, Ethan said simply. And because I meant what I said. I have seen that look before. My mother had that same look when I was a boy, before my father finally drank himself to death and freed her from his fists. He met her eyes, and there was an old pain there, carefully guarded. No one helped her, but I can help you. Florence felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Come on, Ethan said, picking up the lantern. You must be hungry. I am no great cook, but I can manage something edible. The house was small but tidy, clearly the home of a man who lived alone but took pride in his space. Ethan set about making a simple supper of beans and cornbread while Florence perched awkwardly at the small table, unsure what to say or do. "How long were you married?" Ethan asked as he worked, his back to her. 2 years, Florence said. "Before that, we courted for 6 months. He was charming then, attentive. I thought I was fortunate to have caught his eye. He came from a wealthy family in Philadelphia, was educated, sophisticated. Everything a young woman was supposed to want. When did it change?" "Our wedding night," Florence said quietly. "I said something, I do not even remember what, and he slapped me. Told me I needed to learn my place. It only got worse from there." Ethan turned, his expression dark. "How did you get away?" "He beat me unconscious one night, thought he had killed me. Left me in the cellar while he went to figure out what to do with my body. But I woke up, managed to get out through a window. I ran, and I have been running ever since." "That was when?" 7 months ago." Florence wrapped her arms around herself. "He has tracked me across 4 states. He has money, connections. He can go anywhere, ask anyone, and he will never stop. He told me once that I belonged to him, that if he could not have me, no one would." Ethan set a plate in front of her, his jaw tight. "Eat. You are safe here tonight, and we will figure out the rest tomorrow." The food was plain but good, and Florence realized she had not eaten since breakfast. They ate in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. There was something solid about Ethan Langley, something that made her feel, for the first time in months, like she could take a full breath. "The tack room is not comfortable enough for more than a night," Ethan said as he cleared the plates. "There is a spare room here in the house. Small, but it has a real bed and a lock on the door. You can lock it from the inside if that makes you feel safer." "I do not want to impose," Florence began, but Ethan shook his head. "You are not imposing. You are a guest, and you will be treated as such." He paused, then added, "I will not hurt you, Florence. I am not that kind of man." She wanted to believe him. Part of her, the part that was so tired of running, of being afraid, did believe him. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you." The room was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed and a small chest of drawers, but it was clean, and the sheets smelled of soap and sunshine. Florence locked the door as Ethan had suggested, then sank onto the bed and finally let herself cry, great shaking sobs that she muffled in the pillow. She woke to golden light streaming through the window and the sound of movement in the house. For a moment, panic seized her until she remembered where she was. She dressed quickly, splashed water from the basin on her face, and emerged to find Ethan already dressed and making coffee. "Morning," he said, glancing at her. "Hope you slept all right. I am heading out to work the horses, but there is food if you are hungry. You are welcome to stay inside, or you can come out if you want. Whatever makes you comfortable." Florence found herself drawn to the corrals, watching as Ethan worked with a young stallion, all patience and quiet confidence. The horse was skittish, but Ethan never raised his voice, never made a sudden movement. He just kept talking, kept working, until the stallion's ears pricked forward with curiosity instead of fear. "You are good with them," Florence said when Ethan took a break, wiping sweat from his brow. "Horses make sense," Ethan replied, leaning against the fence rail. "They are honest. If they are scared, they show it. If they trust you, they show that too. Wish people were half as straightforward." "Where did you learn?" "Here and there. Worked ranches since I was 14, learned from anyone who would teach me. Saved my money, bought this place 2 years ago. It is not much, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice and something else, a loneliness perhaps. "You have family nearby?" Florence asked. "No family left," Ethan said simply. "Mother died when I was 16, father before that. No siblings, just me." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the horses mill in the corral. Finally, Florence said, "I can earn my keep. I am good with mending, cooking, cleaning. I can help with the horses too if you teach me." Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "You do not have to earn anything. You are welcome here regardless." "I want to," Florence insisted. "I need to do something, not just hide and wait, please." He nodded slowly. "All right then. You can start by helping me muck out the stalls. It is not glamorous work, but it needs doing." Florence found a rhythm in the work, in the simple physical labor that left no room for fear or worry. Ethan worked beside her, showing her how to approach the horses, how to read their moods, how to move around them safely. He was patient, never condescending, and Florence found herself relaxing in his presence. 3 days passed in this way, each one bleeding into the next. Florence cooked meals while Ethan worked, and they ate together at the small table, conversation flowing easier each time. She learned that he loved the mountains, that he had a gift for gentling even the wildest horses, that he read voraciously when he had time, borrowing books from anyone who would lend them. On the 4th morning, Florence woke to find rain drumming on the roof, the first break in the summer heat. She made breakfast, and when Ethan came in from feeding the horses, soaked through and grinning, something shifted in her chest. "Weather finally broke," he said, hanging his hat on a peg. "The horses are happy about it. That paint mare actually nuzzled me this morning instead of trying to bite." Florence laughed and realized with a start that it was the first time she had laughed in months. Progress then. Definite progress. Ethan poured coffee, his expression turning serious. "I rode into town yesterday while you were resting. Thomas is still there, asking questions, watching the roads. But the word I am hearing is that he is getting frustrated, thinks maybe you moved on already." Fear prickled down Florence's spine. "Or he is pretending to think that, waiting for me to feel safe enough to show myself." "That is a possibility," Ethan admitted. "Which is why you should stay here out of sight for a while longer. Let him think he lost your trail." "How long?" Florence asked. Ethan met her eyes. "As long as it takes. I meant what I said, Florence. You are safe here." That night, Florence lay in bed listening to the rain and thinking about the man in the other room. Ethan Langley was nothing like Thomas. Where Thomas had been all surface charm hiding cruelty, Ethan was quiet strength and genuine kindness. He never stood too close, never made her feel trapped or afraid. When he smiled, it reached his eyes, and when he spoke, he meant every word. She was starting to care for him, she realized. Not just gratitude, though there was plenty of that, but something deeper. Something that terrified her because she had sworn never to trust another man, never to put herself in a position to be hurt again. The rain continued through the night and into the next day, turning the ranch into a muddy mess. Florence spent the morning baking bread, the warm yeast smell filling the small house, and was just pulling the loaves from the oven when she heard horses outside. Her blood turned to ice. Multiple horses, multiple riders. She set the bread down carefully and moved to the window, staying back from the glass. Ethan was already striding from the barn, and Florence's heart lurched when she saw Thomas dismounting, 2 other men with him. She recognized one as Samuel Cord, a hired gun Thomas had mentioned during their marriage, a man who did Thomas's dirty work for the right price. Florence could not hear the conversation, but she saw Ethan's posture, the way he stood his ground, and then she saw Thomas point toward the house. Ethan shook his head, said something sharp, and Thomas smiled, that terrible smile Florence knew too well. She watched, helpless, as Thomas strode toward the house despite Ethan's protests. She heard the front door open, heard boots on the wooden floor, and she backed against the far wall, her hands balled into fists. The door to her room swung open, and there he was. Thomas Vance, tall and handsome and radiating fury beneath his composed exterior. His dark eyes fixed on her, and Florence saw murder there, "Florence," he said, and his voice was silk over steel. "My darling wife, how I have missed you." "I am not your wife," Florence said, hating how her voice shook. "I left you. I want nothing to do with you." "You do not get to make that choice," Thomas said, moving into the room. "You are mine. You will always be mine. And you are coming home with me right now. She is not going anywhere with you." Ethan's voice, low and dangerous from the doorway. Thomas turned, his expression shifting to contempt. "This does not concern you, Cowboy. This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," Ethan corrected. "And it concerns me because this is my home and she is my guest. You need to leave." "Or what?" Thomas laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "You will make me. I have 2 armed men outside. You are just one foolish ranch hand playing hero. Step aside and let me take what is mine." "No." Ethan did not move from the doorway. "Florence, get behind me." Florence moved on instinct, slipping past Thomas to stand behind Ethan's solid form. Thomas's face darkened with rage. "You are making a very serious mistake," he said softly. "The only mistake here is you thinking you can come onto my land and threaten someone under my protection," Ethan replied. "I am going to say this one more time. Leave. If you do not, I will make you leave, and I do not care how many men you brought with you." "Samuel," Thomas called, and the gunman appeared in the doorway, his hand on his pistol. "Yeah, boss. Teach this fool some manners." Samuel Cord was fast. Florence would give him that. But Ethan was faster. He moved like lightning, his fist connecting with Samuel's jaw before the man could draw. Samuel went down hard, and Ethan had the gun out of his holster and pointed at Thomas before anyone could blink. "I am a patient man," Ethan said, and there was something cold in his voice now, something that spoke of violence held carefully in check. "But my patience has limits. You have 5 seconds to get out of my house and off my land. If I ever see you near here again, near Florence again, I will not be so polite." Thomas stared at him, fury and calculation warring in his eyes. Finally, he smiled that terrible smile again. "This is not over, Cowboy, not by a long shot. You have just made an enemy you cannot afford to have." "I will take my chances," Ethan said. "Now get out." Thomas stepped over the groaning Samuel, his eyes never leaving Florence. "I will have you back, my dear, one way or another." Then he was gone, calling for his men, and Florence heard them mount up and ride away. Ethan did not lower the gun until the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely. Then he set it carefully on the table and turned to Florence, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" Florence nodded, then shook her head, then found herself trembling so hard her knees gave out. Ethan caught her, lowering her gently into a chair, his hands steady on her shoulders. "He is gone," Ethan said quietly. "I will not let him take you." "You do not understand," Florence whispered. "He will not stop. He will kill you to get to me. He has done it before." Ethan knelt in front of her, his green eyes serious. "Florence, look at me." She did, and he said, "I am not afraid of him, and I meant what I said. You are under my protection now. I will keep you safe." "Why?" the question tore from her throat. "Why would you risk so much for me?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because you deserve to be safe. Because you deserve to live without fear. And because I am starting to care about you a great deal, Florence Ashford." The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and wonderful. Florence stared at him, this quiet, strong man who had asked nothing of her, who had simply offered shelter and protection, and now something more. "I am starting to care about you too," she whispered. Ethan's expression softened, and he reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture so gentle it made her want to weep. "Then let me protect what I care about. Let me help you." Florence nodded, not trusting her voice. Ethan stood, and she immediately missed his closeness. "We need to be prepared," he said, his tone becoming businesslike. Thomas will come back, probably with more men. He is the type to escalate when he does not get his way. Do you know how to shoot? No, Florence admitted. Then I will teach you. And we will make sure every door and window is secure. We have time to prepare, and I intend to use it. The afternoon was spent barricading the house, checking and rechecking locks, loading weapons. Ethan was methodical and calm, but Florence could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept scanning the horizon. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan taught Florence to shoot, setting up targets in the yard and standing behind her, his arms bracketing hers as he showed her how to aim, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger slowly. "You are a natural," he said after she hit the target 3 times in a row. "Better than I was when I started." "I am motivated," Florence replied grimly. They ate a quiet dinner, the ease of the previous days replaced by watchful tension. After, as Florence washed dishes, Ethan spoke from the doorway. "I need to tell you something," he said. "About why I live alone out here, why I am so quick to help someone running from violence." Florence turned, giving him her full attention. "My father was a mean drunk," Ethan said, his voice carefully controlled. "Beat my mother regularly, beat me too when I was old enough to try to stop him. When I was 14, I got big enough to fight back. Put him through a wall one night when he came after Ma with a bottle. He left after that, drank himself to death in some saloon in Kansas City 2 years later. But the damage was done. Ma never recovered, not really. She died young, worn out from years of living in fear." "I am so sorry," Florence said softly. "I swore then that I would never be like him," Ethan continued. "That I would never raise my hand to a woman, would never use my strength to intimidate or control, and that if I ever had the chance to help someone trapped the way Ma was, I would do it without question." He met her eyes. "That is why I helped you, Florence, but it is not why I am asking you to stay." Her heart was pounding. "Why are you asking me to stay?" "Because in these few days, you have brought something to this ranch, to this house, to my life, that I did not even know was missing," Ethan said. "Light. Warmth. Hope. Because when I wake up in the morning, I find myself looking forward to seeing you, talking to you. Because the thought of you leaving, of not seeing your face across the table every day, makes something in my chest ache." Florence crossed the small kitchen to stand in front of him. "I am broken, Ethan. Thomas broke something in me, and I do not know if it can be fixed. I am afraid all the time. I do not know if I can be what you need." "You are not broken," Ethan said fiercely. "You are strong. You survived, you escaped, you kept running even when it would have been easier to give up. And I do not need you to be anything but what you are. I just need you to be here if that is what you want." "I want that," Florence whispered. "I am terrified, but I want that." Ethan reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. "I am terrified too," he admitted. "I have never felt this way about anyone, but I think it is worth being afraid for." When he kissed her, it was nothing like the kisses Thomas had taken, all demand and ownership. This was gentle, questioning, a gift rather than a demand. Florence melted into it, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and when they broke apart, she was breathless. "We will face whatever comes together," Ethan said against her forehead. "I promise you that." That night, Florence slept deeply for the first time in months, feeling safe in a way she had not since before her marriage. But safety, she learned the next morning, was a fragile thing. She woke to the acrid smell of smoke. Florence bolted out of bed, fumbling for her dress, her heart in her throat. The house was not on fire, she realized quickly, but something was. She ran to the window and her blood turned to ice. The barn was burning. Ethan was already outside, a bucket in each hand, his face set in grim determination as he threw water on the flames. Florence did not think. She grabbed her shawl and ran outside, heading straight for the well. "Florence, no," Ethan shouted when he saw her. "Get back inside. The horses." Florence screamed back. She could hear them screaming, could see their shadows moving frantically in the smoke, and there was no way she was leaving them to burn. She soaked her shawl in the water trough and wrapped it around her face, then plunged into the barn. The smoke was thick and choking, the heat immense, but she could see the stalls at the back, could hear the terrified animals. She started opening gates, slapping the horses' hindquarters to drive them toward the door. The paint mare reared, eyes rolling white with terror, and Florence grabbed her halter, talking low and fast. "Come on, girl, come on, you have to move, please move." The mare finally bolted, and Florence opened the last stall, releasing the young stallion. She turned to leave, and a burning beam fell, blocking her path. Panic surged, and then Ethan was there, appearing through the smoke like something from a dream. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back of the barn, toward a small door she had not noticed, and then they were outside, collapsing onto the grass, both of them coughing and gasping. "Are you insane?" Ethan managed between coughs. "You could have died." "So could you," Florence shot back, her throat raw. "And I was not going to let those horses burn." He stared at her, and then, impossibly, he laughed, rough and ragged but genuine. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met." "I learned from the best," Florence replied. And then they were both laughing, slightly hysterical but alive, covered in soot and ash but alive. The barn burned to the ground. There was nothing they could do but watch and make sure the flames did not spread to the house. As dawn broke, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of gray and pink, Ethan put his arm around Florence's shoulders and she leaned into him, exhausted and heartsick. "Thomas did this," she said. "It was not a question." "Most likely," Ethan agreed, his voice hard. "Trying to scare us, trying to show he can hurt us even if he cannot get to you directly. This is my fault. I should never have stayed. I should have kept running." "No." Ethan turned her to face him, his soot-streaked face fierce. "This is his fault, his alone. And we are not going to let him win." "What do we do?" Florence asked, feeling small and helpless. "We rebuild," Ethan said simply. "And we make sure he cannot do this again. I am riding into town today, talking to the sheriff. Thomas has gone too far." Sheriff William Burke was a tired-looking man in his 50s, with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to Ethan's report, took notes, and then sighed heavily. "I believe you," he said. "And I believe this Thomas Vance is responsible. But believing it and proving it are two different things. He has money, which means he has lawyers. And unless you have witnesses who saw him or his men set that fire, there is not much I can do." "So he just gets away with it?" Ethan demanded. "I did not say that," Burke replied. "I said I cannot arrest him without proof. But I can make his life difficult while he is in my town. I can watch him, make sure he knows he is being watched. And I can make sure everyone in Fort Lyon knows what kind of man he is. Money does not buy as much in Colorado as it does back east." It was not enough, but it was something. Ethan returned to the ranch to find Florence had spent the day clearing the debris from the barn, salvaging what could be saved. She looked up when he rode in, her face smudged with soot, and his heart clenched at the determination in her eyes. "The horses are all in the corral," she reported. "None of them seem hurt, just scared. I fed them, checked them over as best I could. We lost all the tack, most of the feed, but the animals are safe." "Florence," Ethan said, dismounting, "you did not have to do all this." "Yes, I did," she replied. "This is my home now if you will have me, and we take care of our home." He pulled her into his arms, not caring that they were both filthy, and held her tight. "Always," he said into her hair, "you will always have a home here." Over the next 2 weeks they rebuilt. Neighbors came to help, bringing lumber and nails and strong backs. Word had spread about the fire and about Thomas Vance, and the community of Fort Lyon rallied around one of their own. Florence was amazed by the generosity, by the way people showed up without being asked, bringing food and supplies and refusing payment. "This is what it means to be part of a community," Martha Henderson explained, bringing over a basket of fresh bread and preserves. "We take care of our own. And you are one of ours now, dear." Florence felt something warm bloom in her chest, something that felt like belonging. The barn rose slowly, taking shape board by board. Ethan worked from dawn to dusk, and Florence worked beside him, learning to hammer nails straight, to measure twice and cut once. They fell into bed exhausted each night, and each morning they rose and did it again. Thomas did not approach again, but Florence felt his presence like a shadow over everything. He was still in town, she learned from Martha, still asking questions, still watching, waiting for his next opportunity. "I cannot live like this forever," Florence said one night as she and Ethan sat on the porch watching the stars come out. "Always looking over my shoulder, always afraid." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "We need to end this one way or another." "How?" "I have been thinking about that." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "We could leave, go somewhere he cannot find us. California maybe, or up north to Montana. Start over somewhere new." "You would give up your ranch for me?" Florence asked, stunned. "In a heartbeat," Ethan said simply. "This place is just land, just wood and nails." "You are so much more than that." Florence felt tears prick her eyes. "I cannot ask that of you. You worked so hard for this place, saved for years. I will not let Thomas take that from you too." "Then what do you suggest?" Florence took a deep breath. "I confront him, face to face. Tell him it is over, that I will never go back, and that he needs to accept that and move on." "Absolutely not," Ethan said flatly. "Florence, the man is dangerous. He set fire to my barn. Who knows what he would do if he got you alone?" "Then come with me," Florence said. "We do it in public, somewhere safe. The sheriff's office, maybe, with witnesses. Force him to hear me, to understand that I mean it." Ethan was silent, clearly wrestling with the idea. Finally, he said, "If we do this, we do it my way, with the sheriff present, with multiple witnesses. And if Thomas even looks at you wrong, I am ending the conversation and getting you out of there." "Agreed, agreed," Florence said. Sheriff Burke was skeptical but willing. "I will be right there," he promised. "And I will have my deputy watching too, but Miss Ashford, are you sure about this?" "Men like Thomas Vance do not take rejection well." "I am sure," Florence said, with more confidence than she felt. "I need to do this. I need to face him and make it clear that he has no power over me anymore." The meeting was set for the next day in the sheriff's office at noon. Florence barely slept that night, and when morning came, her stomach was in knots. Ethan was quiet over breakfast, his expression dark with worry. "You do not have to do this," he said for the 10th time. "We can find another way." "There is no other way," Florence replied. "This is the only way forward." They rode into town together, and Florence felt the weight of every eye on them as they walked to the sheriff's office. Thomas was already there, looking impeccable in an expensive suit, his expression one of wounded innocence. "Florence," he said when she entered, rising to his feet. "Thank God. I have been so worried about you. Come home, please. We can work through this together." "There is nothing to work through," Florence said, forcing herself to stand tall to meet his eyes without flinching. "Our marriage is over, Thomas. I left you and I am never coming back." Thomas's expression hardened. "You are my wife. You belong to me." "No," Florence said firmly. "I belong to myself. And I am telling you here and now in front of witnesses that I want nothing more to do with you. Stop following me. Stop trying to find me. Move on with your life and let me move on with mine. You do not get to tell me what to do, Thomas said, and there was that cold fury she remembered barely contained beneath the surface. I have spent months tracking you, spent a fortune finding you. You are coming home with me one way or another. She is not, Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. She has made her choice clear. Now you need to respect that and leave her alone. Thomas turned his attention to Ethan, his lip curling. You think you can take what is mine. You think some dirt-poor ranch hand can give her what I can. I can give her something you never did, Ethan replied. Safety, respect, the freedom to make her own choices. She does not want freedom, Thomas sneered. She wants to be taken care of, told what to do. She needs a firm hand, someone to keep her in line. And I am that man. You are delusional, Florence said, her voice shaking with anger. I never wanted that. I wanted a partner, someone who respected me. Instead, I got a bully who thought his fists gave him the right to control me. Thomas moved fast, crossing the space between them in 2 strides, and for a moment Florence thought he was going to hit her right there in the sheriff's office. But Ethan was faster, stepping between them, one hand on Thomas's chest, holding him back. Do not even think about it, Ethan said softly, and there was pure steel in his voice. Mr. Vance, Sheriff Burke said, his hand on his gun. I suggest you calm down and step back right now. Thomas shook Ethan off, straightening his jacket with sharp, angry movements. This is not over, he said, his eyes boring into Florence. You are mine, Florence. You will always be mine, and I will make sure that if I cannot have you, no one will. That sounds like a threat, the sheriff said mildly, and I take threats very seriously in my town. I think it is time for you to leave, Mr. Vance, and I strongly suggest you think about leaving Fort Lyon entirely. Things could get very unpleasant for you here otherwise. Thomas looked around the room at the sheriff, at Ethan's protective stance, at Florence's resolute expression. Finally, he smiled that terrible smile. I will leave, he said, but this conversation is not finished, not by a long shot. He strode from the office, and Florence felt her knees go weak with relief. Ethan caught her, his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him gratefully. You did it, he murmured. You faced him down. We did it, Florence corrected. She looked up at the sheriff. Is it over? Will he leave now? Burke's expression was troubled. Hard to say, Miss Ashford, I hope so, but men like that, with pride and money, they do not like losing. Keep your guard up, both of you, and if he shows his face around here again, you come straight to me. They rode back to the ranch in silence, both lost in thought. Florence felt simultaneously lighter and more afraid. She had said her piece, made her position clear, but she did not trust Thomas to accept it. He had never accepted any boundary she had tried to set during their marriage. Why would he start now? 3 days passed with no sign of Thomas. Florence began to hope cautiously that maybe he had actually listened, actually left. The barn was nearly finished, the new wood bright and clean against the weathered boards of the house. Life seemed to be settling into a new normal, one where Florence woke each morning without fear knotting her stomach. On the 4th day, Ethan rode into town for supplies. Florence stayed behind, working on mending some tack that had survived the fire. She was so focused on her work that she did not hear the horse approach until it was nearly at the house. She looked up, and her blood ran cold. Thomas sat astride a massive bay gelding, and he was alone. "Hello, Florence," he said pleasantly, as if they were old friends meeting by chance. "I thought we should talk, just the two of us." "There is nothing to talk about," Florence said, backing toward the house. "Ethan will be back soon. You should leave." "Ethan," Thomas said mockingly, "your cowboy hero. Tell me, Florence, what exactly do you see in him? He has nothing. No education, no prospects, no future, just this pathetic little ranch in the middle of nowhere. He has honor, Florence shot back. He has kindness. He has everything you lack. Thomas dismounted, his movements unhurried, and Florence's fear spiked. She had seen that look before, that calm before the storm. I gave you everything, Thomas said, and now the anger was bleeding through. A beautiful home, fine clothes, a position in society, and you threw it away to run off with some nobody. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me? Having to explain to everyone that my wife had lost her mind, that she was unstable. I was unstable because you beat me, Florence shouted, all the fear and rage of 2 years pouring out. Because you terrorized me every single day. I would rather have nothing, live in a dirt hut, than spend one more second under your roof. Thomas's face twisted with rage, and he started toward her. Florence ran for the house, but he was faster, catching her arm and spinning her around. His grip was bruising, and Florence cried out in pain and fear. You do not get to talk to me that way, Thomas hissed. You do not get to embarrass me, to disobey me, to leave me. I told you that you were mine, that I would never let you go, and I meant it. He raised his hand, and Florence braced for the blow she knew was coming. But then there was the sound of a gun cocking, and Thomas froze. Let her go. Ethan's voice, cold and deadly. Right now. Thomas's hand slowly lowered. He turned, still gripping Florence's arm, to find Ethan standing 20 feet away, his rifle raised and aimed directly at Thomas's chest. You would not shoot me, Thomas said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. You are not a killer. I am not, Ethan agreed. But I will do whatever I have to do to protect Florence, and if that means putting a bullet in you, I will sleep just fine afterward. Now let her go. Thomas released Florence's arm with a shove that sent her stumbling. Ethan did not lower the rifle. Get on your horse and ride out of here, Ethan said. And if you ever come back, if you ever so much as send a letter in Florence's direction, I will hunt you down myself. Do you understand me? You are making a very serious mistake, Thomas said, his voice shaking with rage. The only mistake I made was not running you off the first time you showed your face here, Ethan replied. Now go, before I change my mind about shooting you. Thomas mounted his horse, his movements stiff with fury. He looked down at Florence, and the hatred in his eyes made her shiver. This is not over, he said. You will regret this, both of you. He rode off at a gallop, and Ethan finally lowered the rifle. He was at Florence's side in an instant, his hands gentle as he checked her arm where Thomas had grabbed her. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? I am fine, Florence said, though she was shaking. You came back just in time. I had a bad feeling, Ethan admitted. Got halfway to town and turned around. Thank God I did. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Florence, this cannot keep happening. We need to find a permanent solution. What do you suggest? Florence asked into his chest. Marry me. Florence pulled back, staring at him. What? Marry me, Ethan repeated. Not just for protection, not just to have legal standing to keep him away from you, though those are good reasons. But because I love you, Florence. I have fallen completely in love with you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you feel safe and cherished and free. Marry me because you want to, because you feel the same way. Or tell me you do not, and we will find another way. But I needed to say it, needed you to know. Florence felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were happy tears. I love you too, she whispered. I did not think I could ever trust anyone again, could ever feel safe enough to love someone, but you changed that. You changed everything. Yes, Ethan, yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and Florence felt something inside her finally, truly heal. When they broke apart, Ethan was grinning like a fool. We should do it soon, he said, before Thomas can cause any more trouble. Tomorrow, if the preacher can manage it. Tomorrow, Florence agreed, laughing through her tears. The preacher could manage it, as it turned out. Word spread quickly through Fort Lyon, and by the next afternoon, half the town had crowded into the small church to witness Florence Ashford marry Ethan Langley. Martha Henderson cried through the whole ceremony, and Sheriff Burke stood as one of the witnesses, his hand conspicuously resting on his gun belt. Florence wore a simple dress borrowed from Martha, and Ethan wore his best shirt and a nervous smile. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Ethan kissed her to the cheers of their friends and neighbors, Florence felt a joy so pure it was almost painful. They spent their wedding night in the small house, in Ethan's bed that was now their bed, and Florence learned what it meant to be touched with love instead of violence, to be wanted instead of owned. Ethan was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe every moment, and when Florence finally fell asleep in his arms, she did so without a single nightmare. She woke to Ethan pressed against the window, his expression grim. "What is it?" Florence asked, her heart sinking. "Riders," Ethan said shortly. "A lot of them, coming from town." Florence joined him at the window and felt her blood turn to ice. There were at least a dozen men, and leading them was Thomas. "He brought an army," she whispered. "So did I," Ethan replied. He nodded toward the other direction, and Florence saw more riders approaching, led by Sheriff Burke. Behind him were neighbors, ranchers, townspeople, all armed and all looking ready for a fight. The two groups met in the yard, and Ethan squeezed Florence's hand once before heading outside. She followed, staying close to him, and watched as Thomas and the sheriff faced off. "This is over, Vance," Burke said flatly. "Florence Ashford is now Florence Langley, legally married. She is not your wife, has no obligation to you, and you have no claim on her. Leave now, or I will arrest you for trespassing and harassment." "She is still my wife in the eyes of God," Thomas spat. "She made vows to me first." "Vows you broke every time you raised your hand to her," Ethan said coldly. "You lost any claim to her the first time you hurt her. Now you have a choice. You can leave peacefully, or we can make you leave. But either way, you are leaving." Thomas looked around at the assembled crowd, at the hard faces and ready weapons, and Florence saw the moment he realized he had lost. His face contorted with rage, and he turned his horse toward Florence. "You will regret this," he shouted. "I will make sure of it. You hear me, Florence? This is not over." "Actually, it is," Florence called back, her voice steady and strong. "I am not afraid of you anymore, Thomas. You have no power over me. Go home. Move on with your life. Find someone else to torment, though I pray you never do, but leave me alone. I am done with you." For a moment, Thomas looked like he might charge toward her anyway. But then Sheriff Burke drew his gun, and so did half the men behind him, and Thomas's hired guns suddenly looked a lot less eager to be there. "Come on, boys," one of them said to Thomas. "This is not worth dying over." Thomas sat there a moment longer, hatred radiating from every line of his body. Then he wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. They watched until the group was out of sight, and then Burke turned to Ethan and Florence with a grim smile. "I think that is the last we will see of him," he said. "Man like that, he knows when he is beaten. And the word is already spreading. He tries to come back. He tries to hire anyone in 3 states to help him. They will know what kind of man he is. He is done." Florence felt the tension drain from her body, and she sagged against Ethan. "Is it really over?" she whispered. "It is really over," Ethan confirmed, wrapping his arms around her. He looked at the assembled crowd, at the friends and neighbors who had come to their aid, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Thank you, all of you. We could not have done this without you." "That is what neighbors are for," Martha Henderson called. Now, who wants to help me set up a proper wedding celebration? I will not have these two starting their marriage with nothing but fear and violence. We are going to have a party, and they did. Tables were set up in the yard. Food appeared from seemingly nowhere. Someone produced a fiddle, and Fort Lyon celebrated the marriage of Ethan and Florence Langley with music and dancing and laughter that lasted well into the night. Florence danced with her husband under the stars, his strong arms around her, and felt happier than she had ever thought possible. "Thank you," she murmured as they swayed to the music. "For what?" Ethan asked. "For saving me, for protecting me, for loving me." "You saved yourself," Ethan replied. "You are the one who had the courage to leave, to keep running, to keep fighting. I just gave you a place to land. And as for loving you, well, that is the easiest thing I have ever done." The summer faded into fall and fall into winter. The barn was finished, better than before, and the ranch thrived. Florence learned to ride, to rope, to work cattle alongside Ethan. She discovered she had a gift with the horses, particularly the difficult ones, and several ranchers in the area began bringing their problem animals to the Langley Ranch to be gentled. Word came in November that Thomas Vance had returned to Philadelphia, that he was telling everyone his wife had died out west, some tragic accident. Florence felt a twinge of pity for whatever woman he might set his sights on next, but mostly she felt relief. He had given up. He had finally let her go. Christmas came, and with it a surprise. Martha Henderson arrived with a package wrapped in brown paper, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "This came for you," she said, handing it to Florence. "From back east." Florence opened it cautiously to find a stack of legal documents and a letter. The documents were divorce papers, signed by Thomas, officially ending their marriage. The letter was brief. "You won," it read in Thomas's precise handwriting. "I hope you are satisfied. I hope your cowboy makes you happy. But know that you have humiliated me, cost me socially and financially, and I will never forgive you for it. Consider yourself fortunate that I am too tired to chase you anymore. Do not contact me again." Florence read it aloud to Ethan, and when she finished, he took the letter from her hands and threw it into the fire. "Good riddance," he said simply. "I feel bad," Florence admitted. "Is that strange? I know I should not after everything he did. But I feel bad that he is so twisted up with anger and hate." "That is because you have a kind heart," Ethan said, pulling her close. "But his anger is his own to deal with. You do not owe him anything, not even pity." Spring came, and with it news that made Florence's heart sing. She was pregnant. Ethan whooped with joy when she told him, spinning her around the kitchen until she was dizzy and laughing. "I am going to be a father," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Florence asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Ethan replied. He knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one. I am your papa, and I promise I am going to spend every day of my life making sure you and your mama are loved and safe and happy." Their son was born in late autumn of 1879, a healthy, squalling baby with Ethan's green eyes and Florence's dark hair. They named him Daniel, and Ethan proved to be as gentle and devoted a father as he was a husband. Florence recovered from the birth with Martha Henderson's help, and as she watched Ethan walk the floor with their colicky son at 2 in the morning, singing ridiculous songs and making silly faces, she felt her heart overflow with love. "Who would have thought," she said one evening as they sat on the porch, Daniel asleep in her arms, "that running for my life would lead me here. To this ranch, to you, to our son." "Everything happens for a reason," Ethan said, though his expression turned dark. "I just wish the reason did not have to involve you suffering for so long first. It made me appreciate this," Florence replied. Appreciate you. I do not take a single moment of happiness for granted because I know how rare and precious it is. Daniel grew from a baby to a toddler, and the ranch prospered. Ethan's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and they were able to expand, buying more land, building a larger barn. Florence proved to have a good head for business, keeping the books and negotiating sales, and together they built something solid and lasting. When Daniel was 3, Florence found herself pregnant again, this time with twin girls they named Grace and Hope. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, and sometimes Florence would stop in the middle of some task and just marvel at her life, at how far she had come from that terrified woman fleeing across states. The years passed peacefully. Thomas never returned, never contacted them again. Florence heard through Martha that he had eventually remarried, some society woman from New York, and she hoped for that woman's sake that he had changed, though she doubted it. But it was no longer her concern. She had her own life now, her own family, her own happiness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised her with a trip to Denver, arranging for Martha to watch the children. They stayed in a fancy hotel, ate at expensive restaurants, and one evening as they walked through the gas-lit streets, Ethan took her hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying with me, building this life out here instead of going somewhere bigger, somewhere with more opportunities?" "Never," Florence said immediately. "Ethan, you gave me everything I never knew I wanted, a home, a family, safety, love. I would not trade a single moment of our life together for all the opportunities in the world. Even the hard times," Ethan pressed. "The early years when money was tight, when we were still looking over our shoulders, especially those times," Florence replied, "because we faced them together. Because you showed me what it meant to be partners, to have someone who truly had my back. I love you, Ethan Langley, more now than even the day I married you." "I love you too," Ethan said, pulling her close. "You and the children are my whole world, Florence. Everything I do, everything I build, it is all for you." They returned home to find the children had made them a banner reading, "Welcome home, Mama and Papa," with Martha's help. And as Florence hugged her babies and listened to their excited chatter about everything she had missed, she felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. More years passed. Daniel grew tall and strong like his father, equally good with horses and blessed with his father's patient temperament. The twins were different as night and day, Grace quiet and bookish, Hope wild and fearless. They kept Florence and Ethan constantly on their toes, constantly laughing. On a warm summer evening in 1891, the whole family gathered on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Daniel, now 12, was telling his father about a horse he wanted to try training. The twins, 8 years old, were arguing good-naturedly about something, and Florence sat with Ethan's arm around her shoulders, marveling at the life they had built. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked softly. "About how lucky I am," Florence replied. "About how that terrified woman who stumbled onto your ranch 13 years ago never could have imagined this. About how you took someone broken and helped them become whole again." "You were never broken," Ethan corrected gently. "You were hurt, yes, scared, absolutely, but never broken. You had the strength to leave, to keep fighting, to trust again. That was all you, Florence." "We saved each other," Florence said. "You gave me safety and I gave you family. We built this together." "We did," Ethan agreed, "and we are going to keep building it for as long as we both shall live." Florence leaned into him, watching their children, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, and knew with absolute certainty that she was home. Not just in this place, though she loved the ranch with all her heart, but in Ethan's arms, in the life they had created together. The past was finally, truly behind her. Thomas was a distant memory, a nightmare she had woken from. What mattered was the present, was this moment, was the love that surrounded her from every direction. "Tell us the story, Mama," Grace said suddenly. "About how you and Papa met." Florence and Ethan exchanged a glance, a whole conversation passing between them in that look. They had told the children a simplified version, leaving out the worst of it, saving the full truth for when they were older. "Your mama was lost," Ethan said, pulling Grace onto his lap. "And I was fortunate enough to find her. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst situations." "Your mama taught me that. And your papa taught me that not all men are scary," Florence added, ruffling Daniel's hair. "That some are brave and kind and worth trusting with your whole heart." "That is not very exciting," Hope complained. "I want a story with adventure." "Oh, there was plenty of adventure," Ethan said, his eyes twinkling. "There was a barn fire, angry riders, a whole town coming to help. Maybe when you are older we will tell you the whole tale." "Promise," Hope demanded. "Promise," Florence said. "When you are older we will tell you everything. But for now, just know that your papa saved my life in every way that matters, and I am grateful for it every single day." The children seemed satisfied with that, returning to their games and arguments. As darkness fell and the stars came out, the family eventually moved inside, and Florence helped put the children to bed before joining Ethan in their room. "You think they will understand when they are older?" she asked as she brushed out her hair. "Why we kept so much from them?" "I think they will understand that we wanted them to grow up feeling safe, not afraid," Ethan replied. He came up behind her, taking the brush and running it gently through her dark hair, still thick and only lightly threaded with silver at 38. "And that when the time is right, we will trust them with the truth. But there is no rush. Let them be children a while longer." "You are a good father," Florence said softly. "A good man. I am so grateful I found you." "We found each other," Ethan corrected, setting the brush aside and turning her to face him. "And I am the grateful one. You gave me a reason to be better, to do better. You and the children are everything to me." They held each other in the lamplight, two people who had found safety and love in each other, who had built something beautiful from pain and fear. Outside, the Colorado wind whispered through the mountains, and the horses moved softly in their stalls, and the world kept turning. But here, in this room, in this house, in this life they had created together, there was only love, only peace, only the certainty that no matter what had come before, no matter what challenges might lie ahead, they would face it all together. Florence fell asleep in her husband's arms, the same way she had every night for 13 years, and dreamed not of the past but of the future, of watching their children grow and marry and have children of their own, of growing old with Ethan, their hands still finding each other after decades, of a life fully lived, fully loved, fully free. She had run across states to escape death and found instead everything worth living for. She had been hunted, had hidden, had been saved by a quiet cowboy with a good heart. And together, they had built something that could never be taken away. Years continued to pass in steady succession, each one adding another layer of memories to the foundation of their life. Daniel grew into a fine young man, tall and steady like his father, and by the time he was 18, he was running much of the ranch operations himself. He had inherited Ethan's gift with horses and Florence's head for business, a combination that served him well. The twins, meanwhile, took different paths as Florence had always suspected they would. Grace married at 22, a schoolteacher from Denver who had come west for adventure and found love instead. Hope showed no interest in marriage, preferring to spend her days riding the range, training horses alongside her brother, living as freely as any man. Florence supported both her daughters completely, grateful they lived in a time and place where women could make such choices. It was 1897, and Florence was 44 years old, her hair now more silver than dark, but her eyes still bright and her spirit unbroken. She and Ethan sat on the porch one autumn evening, much as they had countless times before, watching the sun sink behind the mountains that had been their backdrop for nearly 20 years. "Daniel is talking about buying the Johnson place," Ethan said, his own hair gray now, face lined but still handsome to Florence's eyes. "Wants to expand, add cattle to the horse operation." "He has a good head on his shoulders," Florence replied. "He will make it work." "He is like his mother that way," Ethan said with a smile. "Smart, resourceful, not afraid of hard work." "He is like his father," Florence corrected. "Kind, honest, patient, the best parts of both of us." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Florence said, "I saw Martha in town yesterday. She asked if we had heard." "Heard what?" "Thomas died. Last month in Philadelphia." Heart gave out, apparently. Ethan was quiet, studying her face. "How do you feel about that?" Florence thought about it, examining her emotions carefully. "Sad," she said finally. "Not for me, not really, but just sad that someone could spend their whole life being cruel and angry. Sad that he never found peace or happiness, but also relieved, I suppose. Knowing that he can never hurt anyone else the way he hurt me." "You are a better person than I am," Ethan said. "I cannot find it in myself to feel anything but glad he is gone." "You are allowed to feel that way," Florence said gently. "He threatened our family, our home." "Your feelings are valid too." "I spent almost 20 years ready to kill him if he came back," Ethan admitted. "Ready to do whatever it took to keep you safe. And now I will never have to. It is strange, having that weight lifted after carrying it for so long." "We are free," Florence said, taking his hand. "Truly free. He is gone, that part of our past is finally closed. We can just be happy now without any shadow hanging over us." "We have been happy," Ethan pointed out, "for a very long time." "I know," Florence said. "But there was always that tiny part of me, deep down, that worried he would come back, that he would find some way to hurt us again. And now he cannot. Now it is truly, finally over." She leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, and they watched the stars come out over the mountains. The ranch was quiet around them, the horses settled for the night, the house behind them solid and strong. "I love you," Florence murmured. "More than I have ever loved anything or anyone. You gave me back my life, Ethan. You gave me a reason to stop running and start living." "You did the same for me," Ethan replied. "I was just existing before you came along, going through the motions. You brought color and joy and purpose to my life. You gave me a family, a real home. Everything good in my life comes from you." "Everything good in my life comes from us," Florence corrected. "From what we built together." They sat there until the night grew cold, until the moon rose full and bright, illuminating the ranch in silver light. Then they went inside together, to the home they had made, to the life they had created, to the love that had sustained them through every trial. Florence lay in bed that night, listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside her, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. About the terrified woman who had run from town to town, always looking over her shoulder. About the moment she had stumbled onto this ranch and met a quiet cowboy who had changed everything. About the years of building trust, building love, building a life worth living. She thought about her children, grown now and making their own ways in the world, strong and confident and kind. About the grandchildren who would surely come, continuing the legacy she and Ethan had started. About growing old with this man beside her, their hands still finding each other in the dark after decades together. And she thought about Thomas, about the man who had hunted her across states, who had tried to own her, to break her, to destroy her. About how, in the end, she had won simply by surviving, by building something beautiful from the ashes of what he had tried to burn down. The cowboy had hidden her and faced the man himself, just as the story went. But more than that, he had loved her. He had shown her what real partnership looked like, what respect and trust and genuine affection could build. He had given her the space to heal, the safety to grow, the freedom to become herself again, and she had given him the same in return. Two broken people who had found each other and become whole. Two lonely souls who had created a family. Two hearts that had learned to trust again and found something worth holding on to. As Florence drifted off to sleep, her last conscious thought was gratitude. For the ranch, for the town that had welcomed her, for the friends who had stood by them, for the children who had blessed their lives. But most of all, for Ethan. For the man who had saved her life and then spent every day since making sure that life was worth living. The years continued their march, as years do. Florence and Ethan grew old together, their love deepening with each passing season. They watched Daniel marry and have children of his own, watched Grace's family grow, watched Hope finally fall in love with a woman rancher from Wyoming and build a life that made her happy. They welcomed grandchildren, then great-grandchildren, filling the ranch house with multiple generations of love and laughter. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by family, Ethan stood and raised his glass in a toast. "To my wife," he said, his voice still strong despite his 70 years. "Who taught me that bravery is not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. Who showed me what real strength looks like. Who gave me everything I ever wanted and some things I did not even know to wish for. Florence, you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Florence, now 65 but still vibrant, stood and took his hand. "To my husband," she said, her voice clear and certain, "who saw someone running and offered shelter. Who saw someone scared and offered safety. Who saw someone broken and offered love. Ethan, you saved my life, and I will spend every moment I have left being grateful for that. I love you more today than I did 40 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Their family cheered and applauded, and as Florence and Ethan kissed, their great-grandchildren giggled and their grandchildren smiled, and their children looked on with pride and love. This was legacy, Florence thought. Not just children and property, but love passed down through generations, kindness taught by example, strength modeled daily. As the celebration wound down and the family gradually departed, Florence and Ethan found themselves once again on their beloved porch, watching the sunset paint the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and crimson. 40 years, Ethan mused. Feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. "I know what you mean," Florence replied. "Sometimes I still feel like that scared woman who showed up at your fence. Then I look around at everything we built and I cannot believe how far we have come." "You were never just a scared woman," Ethan said firmly. "You were always brave, always strong. You just needed a safe place to remember that. And you gave me that," Florence said. "You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared and the stars emerged, one by one, lighting up the vast Colorado sky. The ranch was quiet around them, solid and enduring, a testament to everything they had built together. "No regrets?" Ethan asked softly. "Not a single one," Florence replied with absolute certainty. "This life, this family, this love, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." "You are more than I ever dreamed possible." "The feeling is entirely mutual," Ethan said, pulling her close. They sat there until the moon rose, until the night grew cold, until finally they went inside together, hand in hand, just as they had done countless times before and would do countless times more. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with the memories of 40 years of love and laughter and life. And if sometimes Florence still woke from old nightmares, if sometimes the past still tried to claim her, she had only to reach out in the dark to find Ethan's hand waiting for hers, solid and sure and real. She had only to remember the cowboy who had hidden her, faced down her demons, and given her a reason to stop running. She had been hunted across states by a man who wanted to own her. But she had been saved by a man who wanted only to love her, to protect her, to stand beside her as an equal partner. And that had made all the difference. Their story did not end with dramatic gestures or grand proclamations. It ended the way all the best love stories end, quietly and peacefully, with two people who had chosen each other every day for 40 years, and would continue choosing each other for however many days they had left. The ex-husband who had hunted her was long dead, forgotten except as a cautionary tale. But the cowboy who had hidden her, who had faced the man himself and refused to let him win, he was very much alive. And so was Florence, more alive than she had been in all the years before she met him. They had built something beautiful from ashes and fear. They had created love from brokenness. They had proven that even the darkest past could give way to the brightest future if you found the right person to walk beside. And as Florence Langley fell asleep that night, 40 years to the day from when she had married Ethan, she did so with a smile on her face and peace in her heart. She had survived. She had escaped. She had healed. And most importantly, she had loved and been loved in return. That was the greatest victory of all. Not just that she had gotten away, but that she had built something worth staying for. Not just that she had found safety, but that she had found home. Not just that a cowboy had hidden her, but that he had loved her. And that love, tested by time and trial, had proven to be the strongest shelter of all.